Okay, I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 7 today. I've been working through the Sermon on the Mount and coming up on the last part of Matthew. Sermon on the Mount is Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Chapter 7 is the last section of it. So I'm going to read it all. I'm not going to preach it all, but I'm going to read it all. And then I'm going to pick out a few things that God's been speaking to me this week about it. Starts out, do not judge or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? And how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give to dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. For everyone who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be open. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? If he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every tree that bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. And not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock, and the rains came, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation upon the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain came, and the streams rose, and the house blew and beat against the winds, and it fell with a great crash. And when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. And most of you who know me probably know I like baseball a little bit, and a little bit. Hey, they won the other day. So back in 2019, Jordan turned 18. He said the only thing he wanted for his birthday was tickets to the Nationals game. So we bought tickets to the Nationals game. Then COVID came and they shut it down. They didn't play. And so then he was going to be here last week. So I went ahead and ordered tickets for Thursday night game. And of course, then the rains came and we got out to there. They said, we're going to cancel it and play it Saturday. So we finally got to go yesterday. 14 months later, we finally got to go. And they beat the Giants in the first game of the doubleheader. So that was good. They should have won the second one. You're right. It was a good game. But baseball, it's a traditional sport, and even baseball now is being affected by technology. Every technology comes into everything. It's creeped its way into baseball. But in order for baseball to be played, they have to have umpires. These are these men that come out there and they do their tell if a person's safe or if a person's out and so forth. If there's a ball fair, is a ball foul, the umpire. Well, now they can the coach can say, hey, I don't believe he's right on that. And they can go to the videotape and they can second guess the umpire and all that kind of stuff. So technology's worked its way into it. I'm glad that churches don't do that, right? David could call foul and say, hey, man, you messed that one up. We're going to look at the videotape and check that out. But there are some instances where they still can't second guess the umpire, right? They're called judgment calls, right? And you can't challenge a judgment call of the umpire. And one of them is balls and strikes. Balls and strikes, right? So when this guy comes up and the pitcher pitches the ball, and if the umpire says it's a strike, it's a strike. It could be 3 feet over your head. The umpire says it's a strike. It's his judgment. It's a strike. Having said that, though, the umpires have certain restrictions, right? They're supposed to. So in order for the ball to be in the strike zone, it's got to be over the plate. It's got to be like at your knees or above, and then it's got to be kind of at your elbows or beneath, right? That's generally the strike zone that they talk about. But it can be different for different people, because you might have a guy come up here who's 6'5", and his strike zone is going to be big. And then you might have a 5'5" guy, and his strike zone is going to be little. So it requires a certain amount of judgment. The umpire is not expected to be perfect, because no human being is perfect, and no umpire can be perfect and call them all right. And players don't expect umpires to be perfect, but they do expect them to be fair. They expect them to be fair. So if you're calling the pitch up here a strike for that team, then when my team's up here, you better call that same pitch a strike, right? In other words, you be fair. Whichever side it is, you want to call it the same way. We learn, don't we, from a very young age, the importance of fairness. Matthew, I'm sure you got a brother and a sister. I'm sure sometime you were dividing up a piece of cake or a piece of pie or a cookie, right? And you still do that, right? You're going to look it over and say, hey, wait a minute, your piece is bigger than my piece, and da-da-da-da-da. And mom probably gets said there somewhere, Mom, come be the umpire. Tell us what's fair here. That's one of the first things little kids learn, is to say, hey, that's not fair, right? So it's like God built the need for fairness in our DNA, right? At the same time, all human beings instantly don't want to be treated unfairly by other people. Nobody wants to be treated unfairly, but sometimes it's harder to see when we're being unfair to someone else, right? Easy to see when somebody's being unfair to me, but it's harder to see when we're being unfair to someone else. We all have blind spots, right? Just like in a car, there are certain places you can't really see too well. You got to really kind of look and twist and turn, right? We have blind spots. Well, we human beings have blind spots too. I know I do. But it's common for us as human beings to magnify the things that other people do, right? When they're being unfair to us, man, it looks super huge. When we do something, it's easy for us to kind of say, that wasn't any big deal. Why are they getting so bent out of shape over that? It wasn't any big deal. And that's just part of human nature. And sometimes, I know none of you ever do this, but sometimes I get mad at somebody for doing something to me, and then I turn around and do the same thing, and then I don't worry about it, right? So it's easy to kind of have two little sets of rules going on. Here in Matthew 7, I like Jesus' teaching here because it's very practical, right? It's down to earth. Jesus is showing us this is how it is. This is how God wants us to learn how to get along with other people, right? This is how he wants us to do it. And so he's talking to his disciples. He's saying, I'm calling you out of this world where there's an awful lot of unfairness and a lot of hypocrisy. And I'm going to teach you how to live in the way that God wants you to live, so that we can all figure out how to love each other and get along right. How to treat other people and evaluate the actions of other people fairly. That's the ticking point, right? How do we evaluate the actions of other people? And so when we come into chapter 7, verse 1, it says, do not judge, Jesus says. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you too will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. How many times have you heard somebody say, don't judge me? Ever heard somebody say, don't judge me? Yeah. Don't judge me. Sometimes it's said in jest. You know, last week was a bad week. Tony, I got really stressed out. I ate a whole package of Oreo cookies. I didn't really do it, but I might have, right? But he said, I ate a whole package of Oreo cookies. I was so stressed out. Don't judge me, right? In other words, don't judge me because I just admitted that I did that, ate those Oreo cookies. But sometimes we say, don't judge me, kind of almost like a joke. Sometimes it's said in earnestness. Yes, my boyfriend and I are living in sin, but please don't judge me. I remember when I was a kid, the Madonna had this song called Papa Don't Preach. You remember that song, Papa Don't Preach, right? About this young girl who was pregnant, wasn't married, and she was telling her daddy that she was pregnant. And she said, Papa don't preach. Papa don't preach. The weight of the thinking is don't judge me, don't condemn me, or don't declare that what I am doing or what I have done is sinful. We say that. Don't judge means don't tell me I'm doing something wrong or something sinful. Here in the United States, we're currently living in the midst of what's known as Pride Month. Have any of you heard of this? This is Pride Month, right? Pride Month. Members of the LGBTQ community are declaring, basically, with Pride Month, they're saying, hey, look, we don't want you judging us, right? We don't want to be judged. When Christians speak out on certain behaviors, we are often met with the response, well, don't judge. Don't judge. Don't tell me that whatever it is wrong. Don't judge. Or they might say, hey, you know, Jesus said, they'll turn our words back against us. They'll use Jesus' words. Well, Jesus said you're not supposed to judge. So that's why I think it's important for us to understand exactly what he is saying here in Matthew 7, because I think sometimes Jesus' words are being taken, and they're being taken out of context, and they're being twisted. And so I'm here to sort of challenge that sort of modern day attempt to use these words to say, well, we as Christians can never comment or never say anything about any action or behavior as being wrong or sinful. And here's where we kind of miss the mark sometimes. In our modern usage of the word judge, we think automatically condemn. So when somebody says, I'm going to judge somebody, we instantly think it's a word of condemnation. But actually the word judge, both in English and also it's translated out of the Greek language, krino, it means much more than simply to condemn. It means to evaluate. It means to discern. It means to separate. It means to decide. There are very few human beings who can navigate even a day in life without making some kind of judgment, some kind of decision, some kind of evaluation. Now, if you're in a coma, right, you know, you're laying there in a bed and they got a feeding tube and you're totally unconscious, yeah, then you're not making any decisions, right? They're making decisions 100% for you. Or if you have severe case of dementia, and I see people at Lincare that have such bad dementia that they're not making any decisions for themselves. But that is very much at the extreme end of it. Even people with moderate dementia, you know, they can just judge, you know, you put this food in front of them and put it in their mouth. I don't like that, right? That's making a judgment. They're saying, I don't like that. I don't want to eat that, right? They make decisions. All of us make judgments all the time. Do you want vanilla cake or chocolate cake? Or vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? You're making a decision. You're making a judgment, right? You go to McDonald's and order your hamburger. What are they going to ask you, David? Would you like fries with that, right? So you got to make a judgment, and you got to make a decision. Am I going to eat the fries, or am I going to get the onion rings or something else? Are you going to get the COVID vaccination, right? You have to judge. Do I think I want to take the vaccination or not? And if you do, am I going to get the Pfizer, or am I going to get the Moderna, or am I going to do the Johnson & Johnson, right? You have to make decisions. We all have to make decisions. You're running late for work. RJ, you know, you got to get to work on time, and you're running late, and you're on 66. Do you drive the speed limit and risk getting a ticket, or do you just say, I'm going to get there and see what happens, right? So you make a judgment, right? Are you going to go to church Sunday? Or are you going to stay in bed, sleep, or go play golf, or go mow the grass? What toppings do I want on that pizza? How do you want your steak cooked? Do you want it well done or medium rare or somewhere in between? Right? That's your judgment. Should I stay faithful to my marriage vows or have an affair with my coworker? Should I wear flats or high heels with that dress? And then sometimes we ask other people to make judgments for us too, or about us too. Do these jeans make me look fat? Right? That's a very dangerous question when your wife asks you that, isn't it, David? Always perfect. Does this striped tie look okay with this checkered shirt? And my wife says, no, it does not. Put a different tie on. Do you think my hair looks better short or long? See, I'm just trying to give you examples. We make judgments all the time. Jesus is not standing up there and saying you should never make any judgments. I mean, that would be impossible to live if we weren't making some sort of a judgment. And even as you go through the sermon, you'll see that Jesus tells us to make judgments, right? When you get down to verse 15, he says, hey, watch out for false prophets, right? He's telling you to make a judgment. He's telling you have to be able to judge between a true prophet and a false prophet. You can't do that if you're not making a judgment. He goes on, he says, a good tree can't bear bad fruit, a bad tree can't bear good fruit. By your fruits you'll recognize them. So Jesus is telling you, you need to make judgments based on what you observe in terms of what a person does. Some people, he says, pretend to be something that they are not. They come in disguise, so you're going to have to judge. Are they a true prophet or a false prophet? You get phone calls, right? You know, is my warranty service really running out? Right? Shall I give this person my social security number and my bank account number so they can fix whatever problem they're telling me I have, right? So you make a judgment and we say, that's a spam call and I'm not gonna answer it. Good fruit, bad fruit. You have to make judgments. We all have to make judgments. Jesus is not telling us not to make judgments. And in verses 15 through 20, he's telling us how to make good judgments. So I did some study on Matthew 7, 1 and 2. Well, when Jesus says don't judge, then if he's not saying don't ever make judgments, what's he saying? A better translation is do not judge unfairly. What Jesus is really saying to us is, hey, don't judge people unfairly. You would never go to a baseball umpire and say, now, umpire, don't judge. Right? Don't judge if it's a ball or a strike. The umpire can't do his job right if he's not judging. But you can say to the umpire, hey, let's call balls and strikes fairly for both teams, right? If you're going to call this a ball for my team, call it a ball for the other team, right? Call it the same way. What Jesus is saying here is that we need to be fair in the judgments that we make about other people. We don't need to hold other people to incredibly high standards, and then meanwhile we hold ourselves to incredibly low standards of behavior. The basic principle here, I believe, is fairness. It is so easy for me to see what someone else is doing that's wrong. And it's so difficult for me to notice when I'm doing something wrong. Because I have gotten very good at making excuses for why I do the things that I do. I'm a great excuse maker. Why are you so impatient all the time, we might ask? You are just an incredibly impatient person, and I just can't stand to be around you. Now, you might feel that way about your parent or your spouse or your child or your sibling or your coworker or your boss or your friend. But what happens when you yourself are impatient? I can't believe that idiot ahead of me is driving in the passing lane and going the speed limit. Doesn't he know I got to get to work, right? I'm going to be late because that joker won't get out of the passing lane and over into slow lane. So we're very quick to criticize others and condemn when we give ourselves good excuses for doing the same thing. It's like we're calling a strike against them, but we're calling a ball for ourselves when it's in the same place. And Jesus says when you do that, you're being fundamentally unfair to other people, right? Paul picks up that theme in Romans chapter 2 and verse 1. I'm not going to read much of it, but I'm going to read this one. It says, therefore you have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else, for at whatever point you judge another, you're condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. That's what Paul has to say about that. You know, you're pointing the finger at somebody else, you do the exact same thing they're doing. Jesus wants us to see that the way God put the world together so that it operates properly is that we use fair and reliable standards of measure for everybody. And these principles are very clear in the Bible. In Proverbs 16, it says, honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of his making. In other words, God wants the weights to be fair and balanced, right? Leviticus 19 says, use honest scales and honest weights, an honest ephah and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. God says, you know, when you're transacting business, make sure you're being fair. You're not trying to cheat somebody or look at it unfairly. Proverbs 11:1 says, the Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate rates are a favor to him. God doesn't like it when we are acting in a fundamentally unfair way with others. Proverbs 20:23, the Lord detests different weights and dishonest scales do not please him. Who would have thought that God gets so ticked off about a little thing like that? God doesn't like the local grocer who tries to cheat you by using dishonest weights and giving you less than what you are paying for. A few years ago, back to my baseball analogy, it was discovered that the Houston Astros were cheating in a very egregious way. Now, baseball relies on the pitcher throwing the ball to the batter, trying to trick the batter into swinging or not swinging at a pitch. And so the catcher and the pitcher use signals, right? The catcher puts down fingers and say, okay, throw a fastball, throw a curveball, throw a slider, whatever. So they depend on this little communication, this secret communication, right? Nobody else can see it. And because if the batter knew exactly what pitch was coming ahead of time, it would give him an unfair advantage in the competition, right? And so baseball polices this very closely, and you know, sign stealing is an absolute no-no. Yet the Houston Astros figured out a way to steal signs and to capture videos of the catcher's signs. And then they figured out a way to send that sign into the dugout, and then they would sit there with the garbage can and they would bang on it. And the batter hears a particular sound, and you know, oh, okay, he's going to throw me a curveball, so I'm going to get ready for a curveball, and boom, I'm going to hit that ball over the fence. And that's what they did. The Astros got caught cheating. People got fired. Sanctions were levied against the team. And now wherever the Houston Astros go as a visiting team, everybody boos them because they're a bunch of cheaters. Nobody wants cheaters because we all recognize the importance of fairness. And God detests unfairness. And so do we when other people are being unfair to us. But we are often blind to the ways that we are unfair to others and the way we think about and judge them for what they do. One of the biggest ways that we are more unfair to others than ourselves is when I attribute a bad motivation to why somebody does a certain thing. Now, hang there with me for just a second. Anybody ever remember the movie A Christmas Story? That's the story about the little Ralphie gets his Red Ryder BB gun and shoots his... I'm glad John and Carmen aren't here because I think their grandson actually got his eyes shot out this week, so that would probably have been a bad thing. But that was the whole premise of it. You'll shoot your eye out. I'm not going to let you have this BB gun. You'll shoot your eye out. But I think it's a hilarious movie. I love that movie. But in one element of it, the dad, who is kind of a very gruff character, kind of mean, you know, he's just being a gruff old dad, but he gets this prize. It's called a major award. It gets shipped to him. He won some sort of contest where he'd filled in it was a crossword puzzle or something. He won it. And he was so proud of his major award. He opens up this big crate, and here's this lamp that looks like a woman's leg, right? With a stocking and a high heel, right? And he's so proud of his major award, and he can't believe this very tacky-looking lamp is all his. And so what does he do? He runs out and puts it by the front window so everybody in the neighborhood can see his major award. And he is just ecstatic. His wife, on the other hand, is not so pleased about it. She's like, That is the most awful looking thing I've ever seen. But she doesn't want to dampen her husband's joy and enthusiasm. She does not want that leg sticking there in her window for the whole neighborhood to see. It's embarrassing. So what happens? Well, that remains a mystery to this day, exactly what happened. But somehow when she's dusting, she accidentally knocks this lamp down. It breaks into 1,000 pieces. The husband comes running in, sees his major award shattered on the floor, and he gathers it up, and he says, "Where's the glue?" Does anybody know what she says? She says, "The glue's all gone." He says, "You used up all the glue on purpose," right? What's he doing? He's judging her motivation. He's assuming that she broke the lamp because she hated it. Fairly speaking, she probably did break the lamp, But anyway, but the point is, and ever since then, in my house, when I go to get something and it's gone, like glue or milk or peanut butter or duct tape or toilet paper, and I will say, "You used up all the milk on purpose." It's funny. It's a joke. My kids think I'm hilarious, I think. My wife certainly does. But anyway, here's the problem. The lamp did get knocked down. That much we know. It was broken and the glue was all gone. Those things are all facts and evidence. We know those to be true. What we don't know is, was this an intentional act or was it an accident, right? Did Ralphie's mom intentionally break the lamp to make sure that there was no glue available to repair it? Or was it a bad accident and an unfortunate set of coincidences? I think what Jesus is rightly pointing out to us is we need to look at and evaluate other people's actions, but should not pretend that we can look into other people's hearts and know why they did what they did, their motivations. If we are honest with ourselves, I don't always understand why I do some of the things that I do. RJ, you ever feel that way? Why did I do that? I don't even know, right? The Apostle Paul understood this well. In Romans 7:15, Paul said, this is Paul now. This is one of the great founders of the church. He said, "I don't understand what I do. For I want to do good, I don't do, and the things I hate, I do." I don't understand myself. He says, "I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing." Paul says, I'm a mystery even to myself sometimes, why I do the things I do and don't do the things that I should do. Now, God is perfect and eternal, and God is able to look beyond actions to our hearts and know what the intent of my heart is. God knows why I do or do not do a particular thing, even if I don't. The Bible proves this out in 1 Samuel 16. Samuel has been told by God to appoint a new king for Israel because Saul is being removed as the king. And so he says, "I want you to go to this guy named Jesse in Bethlehem. And one of his sons is going to be the next king." And he's got like 8 sons. And so Samuel goes to Jesse and says, "I want to see your sons." And says he brings his first son in. And when they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab, the first son, and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." Apparently he was so tall, good looking. She said, "Boy, he looks like a king." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Hey, Samuel, don't consider his appearance. Don't judge a book by its cover, his height. For I have rejected him, because the Lord does not look at things the way people look at them. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart," right? And that's a powerful principle. Human beings can only make judgments about what they see. Only God is able to see beyond the external, to see what's going on in our hearts. So going back to Matthew 7, then Jesus says, a good tree can't bear bad fruit, a bad tree can't bear good fruit. By their fruits you will recognize them. You and I are not equipped to be able to judge what's in another person's heart. That's the point. But we can look at their actions and determine if their actions correspond to what God's word says is right and wrong, if that's consistent. But then Jesus says, but before you do that, before you even judge their actions, first of all, you need to do a deep dive into your own actions and attempt to understand your own motivations. So back in Matthew 7, verse 3, he says, "Why are you looking at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye. Now I'm sure that was good for a laugh at the time, right? Jesus said, why are you trying to pick a piece of sawdust out of his eye? You got a big 2x4 sticking out of your eye. You need to get rid of that first before you try and start picking the specks out of other people's eyes. It's much easier, Jesus says, to notice and nitpick and criticize the actions of other people while giving a lot of grace for the things that we do. That can be much more serious. So Jesus is using hyperbole. He's making a point, sawdust versus a big wooden plank. We're often blind to our own sins, our own flaws, our own mistakes, but highly critical of other people. Now, Jesus is not telling us that you should never have an opinion about someone else's actions, but that you shouldn't hold others to a much more rigid standard than you hold yourself to, is what he's saying, than you're prepared to hold yourself to. And also, before we rush to judgment against what another person does, we should first do a self-assessment of our own behavior. If we do take the time to go through a thorough, honest self-assessment, then we'll be in a much better position to speak the truth in love to that other person and give them an honest assessment about their actions. And when we do go to that person in love, we need to address their actions, not their motivation, right? Okay, you broke the lamp, but you did it on purpose? Well, no, that's not my decision to make. So let's go back to that story. Why was the glue gone? That's the question. Why was the glue gone? Maybe she had just helped Ralphie do a school project and they'd used up all the glue doing the school project. And she hadn't gone to the store to buy more glue. So instead of saying you used up all the glue on purpose, what he can say is, I'm very sad that my lamp was just broken. I thought a lot of that lamp. I would like to repair that lamp, and I'm feeling very frustrated that there is now no glue available for me to fix it. And then maybe his wife could respond and say, I am so sorry, sweetheart, I broke your lamp. It was an accident. She could say that. Or she could say, I know that lamp meant a lot to you, but I thought it was terribly tacky, and I was embarrassed to have it in our window, and I did knock it over on purpose, and I can now see that really hurt you, and I'm sorry, and I hope you will forgive me. And I'm also sorry that I dumped out all the glue so that you couldn't repair it. Would you please forgive me? That was wrong of me to do. I will go to the store and buy more glue and help you fix it, and then maybe together we can talk about a place where we can put it in the future, Crystal, right? Maybe we'll decide on that. Now, here's some questions to ask. Was Ralphie's mom wrong for thinking that lamp was tacky looking? Was that wrong? That was her judgment. That is a tacky looking lamp. She wasn't wrong. We all make decisions, right? We all have opinions. That was her opinion. It was a tacky lamp. But she could have expressed how she felt instead of passively, aggressively breaking the lamp and pretending it was an accident, right? She could have had a conversation and said, I know you really like that lamp, but I don't like it in our window, and I think we should put it someplace else. Maybe Ralphie's dad bears some responsibility too. Maybe he could have asked his wife how she felt before he put it in the window and left it there. Maybe he could have said, honey, is it all right with you? And then that would have an opportunity for her to say, well, I think it might look better in your office at the other end of the house, right? That would have been one way of handling it. But maybe he had a pattern of insisting on his getting his own way all the time that made her kind of afraid to confront him on this issue because she was afraid he might blow up at her. So oftentimes in conflict, there's kind of problems on both sides sometimes, aren't there? Usually it's not just one person. It's usually both people contribute to it. Part of taking the log out of our eye is looking at ourselves and saying, how did I contribute to this situation? Sometimes we contribute to conflict by saying or doing nothing, right? You ever know people like that? They never say anything. They just let it all happen. And then eventually they explode or they do something else to get back at them. So maybe she was mistaken in not expressing how she felt. Maybe he was wrong for not noticing or not paying attention to the fact that she was not particularly happy with the way things were. Those patterns of behavior are as old as time, and they contribute to a lot of the reasons we have trouble getting along with other people. So, back to Jesus. We all judge. I mean, we make decisions. We evaluate. I like anchovies on pizza. I think anchovies belong on pizza. Crystal, I can see that you probably don't feel the same way about that. And that's okay. You're just judging me and saying, something's wrong with that man if he likes those little fish.
His family feels the same way.
Hey, don't judge me. I like anchovies on my pizza, right? We can agree to disagree. I also love dill pickles and don't like sweet pickles. So we all have our thing. And I don't like watermelon. So those are the things we do. Judging is not the problem. We all have opinions. We all make decisions. That's not the problem. Holding someone else to a higher standard than we are willing to hold ourselves to is the problem. Judging is not the problem. Judging unfairly is the problem. Judging a person's intention or motivation or pretending like we can look into their hearts and know exactly why they did what they did, that is a problem. That's what Jesus is getting to. Failing to speak the truth in love and choosing instead to either get revenge or to act in a covert or passive-aggressive manner, that is a problem. And so Jesus well summed it up, right? And we know this, the golden rule. He says, in everything, do what you would have, do to others what you would have them to do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Jesus says, basically, if you could get that one point down, treat other people fairly the way you want to be treated, that basically is what this is all about, right? It just takes us a long time to get it into our noggins. You want other people not to pretend that they can see into your heart and know the motivation for why you do something and to determine if it was heartful or intentional or accidental, right? I mean, don't we all? We don't want people to judge our motivations. That's what they want back from you. You want people to tell you the truth lovingly to you even when you do something that they think is wrong or hurtful, don't you? But you prefer that they not hold you to a higher standard than the which they are willing to hold themselves to. We want fair judgment from other people. We want them to call balls and strikes on us fairly, right? Same treatment. And we should do the same thing for others. When we call balls and strikes on them, we ought to use fair standards. We should treat other people the way that we want to be treated ourselves. So the next time you or I are tempted to run out and cast judgment on a person's notification or motivation, you use up all the glue on purpose, stop. Just stop. Do a quick self-assessment. What may have I done to contribute to this situation? How would I want to be treated if I was in their shoes? Can I simply speak to their action without assigning a motive to why they did the action? Imagine what it would be like if we all did this. Man, all those poor lawyers that do divorces would have to go out of business, right? And a lot of police officers would have to go out of business. And a lot of judges would have to go out of business. There would be a lot less hurt and anger and conflict and blame and pain in our daily relationships. And it would be a far more loving, kind, and peaceful world, the kind of world that God intends for it to be. And that's what Jesus is simply trying to teach us how to do, how to be the kind of people. So I invite us all today to listen to these words of our Master Jesus, follow his instructions on how to live in a way that is a much more fair when we make our judgments every day. Thanks for listening to me. It's getting hot. Thank you for not raining on us. Let's sing our closing song.